Hey guys, so by popular demand, I'm gonna do a start to finish series on spawning bettas. And we have two pairs here that we're gonna take from beginning to end, meaning we're gonna talk about why I'm picking these two pairs to spawn with each other. And a little bit about maybe what you look for in a spawning pair. We're going to talk about conditioning, how long and how to condition your fish for breeding. And we'll talk about setting up a spawn tank, and some of the equipment and things I think you need to have. And finally, with any luck, we'll get these pairs to actually spawn and produce fry. So in this first video, what I want to talk about, as I said, is first I'll talk about a little bit about each of these pairs and why I picked them, and talk about looking for fish that complement each other and stuff like that. But before I do that, I also want to touch on some things maybe to think about before you jump into betta breeding with both feet. This is a very time-consuming hobby. These fry are, when they hatch, they're teeny tiny. It's kind of unfathomable how tiny these guys are, unless you have actually seen them in person. And because they're so tiny, they really need live foods, which means you have to take the time to harvest and hatch and culture live foods for them. And it's very hard to take care of them, especially when they're little. You have to be careful not to suck them up, doing water changes and not stress them out, and stuff like that. And then once you get them to jarring size, there's a whole other aspect of time that comes in where you have to have time to do water changes on all these jars and stuff like that. So it's definitely not something that I recommend just taking up for the fun of it. I really think you have to be dedicated if you're going to be successful with raising these bettas. Other things to think about are, do you have the funds to raise a spawn? The equipment doesn't really cost that much, especially if you're thrifty, if you take the time to find deals and slowly accumulate the things you need. I do suggest trying to buy as nice a pair, as high quality a pair as you can. At the same time, I'm not a person that degrades anybody that can't afford a nice pair. If you can only afford what you can get from a pet store, by all means, that shouldn't stop you from breeding, as long as you have a goal in mind. If your goal is to breed blue veil tails or red veil tails, and you have a blue veil tail male, blue veil tail female, go right on ahead. Don't let the fact that your fish come from a pet store stop you. But if you can afford a nicer pair, try to buy as nice a pair as you can. Going along with that, breed what you want. So many times I see people saying, what can I breed that will sell well? If you're getting into betta breeding to make money, let me tell you, it's almost impossible to turn a profit breeding bettas. Especially when you calculate your time. You really have to breed them by the thousands in order to break even on these fish. You have to have a huge operation. So trying to breed them just so you think you make some money, believe me, you're not going to make that much money on these fish. Do it because you love the fish and you want to Raise them and make more and make them better. Don't do it because you think it's some get rich quick scheme, because it really isn't. Last thing to consider, and I touched on this before, are you willing to culture live foods? This is something I feel is essential when you're breeding and raising betta fish. They really do need live foods, especially during the first month of life, in order to grow well and do well. Yes, there's people that have raised fry on just like powdered flake foods and stuff like that, but really, there's a reason that so many people subscribe to one certain idea, and it's because it works. So if you have 50 people telling you you need brine shrimp, or you need Daphne, you need some other live food, and you're having one person over in the corner saying, oh, well, I raised them on flakes, hedge your bets and go with the majority. So that's just some things to think about. If you aren't squeamish with live foods, if you have the time and the dedication and the money to put forth to get yourself started, by all means, it's really fun and rewarding, but it is also very hard work. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about our 2 example pairs and why I picked them. I picked a long fin pair. Long fin meaning anything with long fins, obviously. A long fin can be a veil tail, a long fin can be a crown tail, a double tail, or in this case, these guys are half moons. Over here, I have short fins. And again, same thing. Short fins are normally placots. These guys happen to be Dumbo placots. You can have crown tail placots. You can have double tail placots. Short fins means they have short fins. Now, the reason I picked 2 pairs is not because there's much difference between breeding a placot pair and a long fin pair. It's because even if you do everything by the book, everything right, sometimes your pairs still just don't breed for whatever reason, or they might be an egg eater or something like that. Neither of these pairs are successful spawners. I've never tried to spawn the half moon pair. I've tried to spawn these guys once, but I had an accident in the spawn tank, and I had to take them out of the tank. So these guys have never spawned either. So when you're using fish that aren't proven spawners, it's always better to hedge your bets and go with 2 pairs if you're doing something like this where you want an example. So that's why we have 2. That said, if you're just starting out, start with 1 pair. Don't start with 12 pairs or even 2 pairs. Start with 1 pair. See if you can do it before you try to become the grand champion breeder of the United States or wherever you're from. You'll see me oftentimes spawning multiple pairs, but know that I have over 7 years experience raising these guys, and I have 12 years keeping them, and I know very well what I can handle. So I know that I can handle X number of spawns, and so I can do multiple spawns at once. If you're just starting out, pick 1 pair and spawn that 1 pair, and then once you're successful, you can branch out into more things if that's what you want to do. So let's talk a little bit in depth about each pair, why I picked them, and how they complement each other, and maybe some things that we're going to look for that will be issues to look out for in the fry, what we call faults. Now, I'm not going to get into a lot of the IBC standards and minor faults and this and that. If you want to learn more about standards and how we judge fish, you can find the standards that I breed by, the IBC standards, on ibcbettas.org. I'll put a link to that in the description. There's also Bettas for All, which is a European club. They have their own standards that vary slightly from the International Betta Congress standards. And I believe there's also even more clubs in Asia that have differing standards. But for the intents and purposes of my channel, I breed for IBC standards. For the most part, some things I do disagree on, and in that case, I breed for what I think is best. But for the most part, I breed for IBC standards. So first, we're looking at the placots. These guys are obviously Dumbos. You guys will have seen these guys before. I raised them. You'll notice that their ears are torn up a little bit. Like I said, I did try to breed these guys once. So the female got nipped up a little bit, but I ended up accidentally breaking the lid to their tank, and there was glass all in their tank, so I had to separate them, and I just haven't spawned or tried to spawn them again since. These guys come from a yellow butterfly male who was a double-tail placot crossed to a purple butterfly female. And in this spawn, I got pastels, which is what this girl is, where she's got kind of a pinky body, a whitish pink body. And then the male who's hiding over here, if we can get him to come back out, he is what we call a salamander, where his body was purple and he had kind of a butterfly pattern. He's marbled, or he is red, has red loss, so he lost some of his red, which makes him look a little bit weird. He kind of has a gray body now. You can see patches of red, but before he lost the red, he was a very deep and vibrant purple to his body. Both of these fish have a butterfly pattern. These guys do as well, where they have white and then a color, and it's in a band, like you can see with this female. And obviously these guys over here have the white Dumbo fins. The reason I'm spawning this pair is to continue my line. That's my main goal with them. Both of these fish were shown. The male got a first place, the female got a third. So I know they have decent quality form, and I know that they carry the double tail, which is something I want, and they carry nice pectoral size. Their ears are nice and big. So I'm hoping that by spawning them together, I'm going to solidify those traits and get more high quality Dumbo placots from them. And I'm also hoping in this next generation that I will have the double tail pop back up, because double tail is a recessive. So this is the first generation. They didn't have any double tails, but when I cross these two fish together, I should get double tails again. So that's my main goal with these guys. I'm continuing the line and hopefully perfecting the form and the color as I go along. These guys, my goal is butterflies, mainly butterfly half moons. Now you will notice this male did chew up his fins a little bit, so it makes it a little harder to talk about his form. I did see him, and I do know what he looked like before he chewed up his fins, but he has very nice form for a half moon. He has good color. He has a couple of faults where his color is bleeding in, so you can kind of see where the red kind of blends into the white on his fins. That's what we call bleeding, and ideally you want that to be a sharp line, a sharp contrasting line. So that's a fault of his. The female is a sibling as well. She has a few faults. She has a slanted anal fin where it kind of goes down. And then her caudal fin, her tail fin right here, is a little bit round. Ideally, when you're looking at a half moon, you want their fin to be in the shape of a D, where it's very sharp, where it goes up and it curves over. So, even though these fish have faults, they also have a lot of pluses. They also come from a breeder who has very high quality lines. These guys are from Pat Sayawan. He's been breeding this salamander butterfly line for years and years, and the fish in this line are very consistent. So even though these fish have a couple of faults, I'm confident I will get decent fry from them. And no spawn is going to be perfect. So when we're talking about faults and stuff, you need to realize that no matter what fish you buy, it's going to have some kind of fault. There's always room for improvement, and that's half the fun of breeding these guys. So form and color aside, what are some things that you look for in a breeding pair? One thing is they need to be healthy. Are they active? Are they eating well? Are they swimming around? When they see another fish, do they respond positively or do they respond negatively? Are they curious or are they hiding and cowering? Now these guys are a little bit tired. I tried to film this video and my camera freaked out like I told you guys it's been doing. So they might not flare. That guy's looking at them, that female's looking, but they're not scared of each other. There he goes. Flaring and the female's trying to get to him, that's kind of the interest you want to see. That doesn't mean these guys are ready to go in a spawn tank right now. They're not. But showing that interest is a good sign. This guy not really showing that much interest, that could be a red flag that maybe he's not going to be a good breeder. But I know because I've raised this guy and I see him every day that he's just tired and he's a little bit stressed out because he's in the bright light and everything. So he's good to go. So health is a big issue, and one of the reasons why we generally, or you generally hear, don't get your fish from a pet store. But really, as long as you know what to look for in a healthy fish, getting them from a pet store isn't the end of the world, especially if you have a specific goal in mind, and pet store fish will help you achieve that goal. Now that we have our pairs picked out, the next step would be to get them conditioned. Generally, the conditioning process lasts about 2 weeks. Fortunately for you guys, I've already been conditioning these guys for about a week, so that's gonna help us fast forward through the series a little bit. But the next video, I will talk about what we do to condition the fish, what you should be feeding them, how you should be changing water, and all that. And that'll be coming out probably next week, very early. Again, no promises on that. So, alright guys, thank you for watching. If you want to follow along the series, please subscribe so you don't miss the next installments. And as always, if you need to get in contact with me, if you have questions or comments, contact me on YouTube, contact me on my Facebook page at Moon River Bettas. I even have an Instagram now, also called Moon River Bettas, although I have to admit I'm not very active on there yet, and I haven't really learned how to do it. But you can still follow me, and one day maybe I'll make it over there and actually start posting stuff. So, alright guys, thanks for watching. Be looking out for the next video, and I'll see you then.